Most people spend their lives talking about what they're going to do. They announce their plans, brag about their goals, and get high on the reactions instead of the results. But if talking was enough, everyone would be successful. The truth is simple results only come from silent, consistent, relentless work, not noise, not approval, not attention. If you really want to change your life, disappear, not from the world, just from the distractions, the validation chasing, the need to be seen while you're still becoming. The world doesn't need to watch the process. It only needs to witness the outcome. 6 months of focused execution can put you ahead of people who have been in the same place for 6 years. 6 months of discipline without announcing every move can turn doubt into respect. 6 months of dealing with your weaknesses, instead of hiding behind excuses, can make you unrecognizable in the best way. Most people never reach the results they want because they spend more energy talking about their plans than executing them. They make announcements, share their intentions, and expect praise before they've even started. The problem is that every time you talk about what you're going to do, you get a small hit of satisfaction, just enough to feel progress without actually earning it. Real progress doesn't come from telling people what you will achieve. It comes from keeping your head down and doing what needs to be done when nobody's watching. 6 months of intense focus can produce more growth than 6 years of half-hearted effort. When you remove distractions, eliminate social noise, and commit to one direction, momentum builds faster than you expect. Most people underestimate how much transformation is possible in a short period of time when all their energy is pointed in one direction. 6 months of consistent, disciplined execution can completely rewrite your identity, your finances, your skills, and your trajectory. Silence is a competitive advantage. When you stop broadcasting your progress, the pressure disappears, no one is judging you, no one is watching for your next move, and no one is waiting to react to your outcomes. This freedom allows you to operate without fear, insecurity, or comparison. Growth happens faster when you're working for yourself instead of performing for an audience. Most people want the appearance of progress, not the reality. They post motivational quotes, talk about their grind, and pretend they're moving forward when nothing is changing. It's far easier to craft an image of improvement than to face the uncomfortable truth that action is missing. The few who actually make progress aren't louder, they're busier. They let their effort talk instead of their ego. Disappearing forces discipline. When you choose isolation for growth, you remove excuses. You no longer rely on validation or applause to stay motivated. You're left alone with your goals, your habits, and your progress. That's where self-accountability grows stronger. That's where you start stacking wins, one day at a time, until consistency becomes part of who you are rather than something you struggle to maintain. In silence, you refine your skills. Without social feedback pushing you to rush results, you have the patience to master what matters. You can study harder, build better systems, learn faster, and correct your weaknesses without feeling like every setback is being observed. Real improvement often requires privacy because most breakthroughs are messy before they look impressive. After months of dedication, you return with proof instead of promises. People who once doubted you are forced to reconsider their assumptions, not because you argued with them, but because you outgrew their expectations. Nothing earns respect faster than undeniable results produced without fanfare. You won't need to convince anyone of your transformation. The evidence will speak louder than your words ever could. When you re-enter the world after months of focused evolution, no one will ask what you were doing. They'll ask how you changed so dramatically. That question is the reward for the work that no one saw. Most people spend years working with scattered attention, jumping between goals, projects, and distractions, never giving anything enough time to see real momentum. 6 months of extreme focus is rare because it requires sacrifice, saying no to comfort, no to noise, and yes to discipline. When every decision, every hour, and every action is aligned toward one objective, progress compounds at a speed that surprises even the person doing the work. Most people don't lack potential, they lack concentration. The gap between average and exceptional is often nothing more than uninterrupted commitment. When you give 6 months to one mission, you eliminate the friction created by switching direction. Each time someone changes plans, they reset their progress, lose their rhythm, and waste mental energy rethinking decisions. Focus removes that cycle. You start stacking days, stacking wins, stacking improvements, and each step builds on the last instead of replacing it. By staying locked in, you build a foundation strong enough to handle the pressure that comes with bigger growth. Distractions are the most expensive tax people pay without realizing it. Every notification, every unnecessary conversation, every moment spent comparing yourself to others, these tiny leaks drain your momentum. 6 months of disciplined commitment forces you to patch those holes. Suddenly, you're not bleeding energy into things that don't matter. Your attention becomes a weapon instead of a weakness. Progress accelerates because your effort is going somewhere instead of everywhere. In 6 months of focus, skills that once felt impossible become normal. Repetitions stack. Hours compound. Problems that used to feel overwhelming become routine. The human brain adapts quickly when forced into consistency, and the person who once struggled begins to operate with smooth execution. What surprises most people isn't how far they can go in 6 months. It's how far they should have gone years ago if they had been this focused the whole time. The people who watch from the outside will assume something magical happened. They'll look at the transformation and believe it happened overnight. They won't see the late nights, the early mornings, the silent corrections, the failures no one heard about, and the hours spent grinding without applause. They don't understand that the magic wasn't luck, it was consistency without interruption. That's the advantage that focus creates. Most people want visible progress, not real progress. They want others to see the effort, praise the journey, and recognize the grind. But when you learn to work without needing attention, the work gets cleaner, sharper, and more honest. There is nothing to prove externally, only something to build internally. That internal shift transforms achievement from a performance into a lifestyle. You begin to pursue growth because it matters, not because someone is watching. 6 months of focus changes how you think. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop seeking the fastest results and start seeking the strongest execution. You develop a mindset that can handle pressure, days with no motivation, and moments where most people would quit. That toughness doesn't come from success. It comes from showing up on the days where success seems far away. 6 months of that rewrites your mental identity from someone who tries to someone who finishes. And by the time 6 months pass, you realize how little external validation mattered in the first place. You look at the progress, the growth, the improvement in your discipline, and you recognize that this was never about impressing anyone else. It was about proving to yourself what you could accomplish once you stopped delaying, stopped doubting, and finally gave one mission your full attention. Most people struggle to reach meaningful progress because they are constantly performing for the world instead of building in silence. When every decision is filtered through what will people think, progress slows down. Silence removes that pressure. When no one knows what you're working on, you stop worrying about opinions, judgment, and comparison. You stop trying to look successful and start behaving like someone who's actually committed. The energy that was once spent managing perception is now redirected into building reality. When no audience is watching, your mindset shifts from performing to improving. You no longer feel obligated to prove that you're making progress every day. Instead, you're focused on actually getting better. Growth becomes internal rather than external. You're not chasing applause like validation or recognition. You're chasing capability, and capability is earned in private long before it becomes visible in public. Operating without an audience also removes the emotional highs and lows that come from external reactions. If no one praises you when you're doing well, you also can't be discouraged when no one notices your efforts. The absence of external feedback forces you to build self-reliance. You start measuring your progress against your own output, your own discipline, your own goals, not someone else's approval. This creates a level of emotional consistency that most people never develop because their motivation rises and falls based on who's paying attention. Silence gives you room to be terrible before you become great. Most progress looks ugly in the beginning. Skills are messy. Systems are inefficient. Results are small. When people build publicly, they often quit early because they're embarrassed by how slow it feels. In private, you have the freedom to struggle without being watched. You can make mistakes, learn, adjust, refine, and grow without the weight of criticism or the fear of being judged before you're ready. Without an audience, there is no need to rush the process. You stop trying to create quick results just to prove you're on the right track. Instead, you focus on laying strong foundations, habits, routines, skill sets, and discipline that can support long-term success. Growth becomes sustainable rather than sporadic. You start thinking in terms of long-term transformation rather than short-term validation. And when progress is built on discipline instead of emotion, it lasts. Silence also protects your momentum. Most people don't realize how fragile momentum is. One negative comment, one skeptical reaction, one unsupportive conversation can derail weeks of focus. When you work privately, you shield your progress from people who can't see your potential. You avoid their doubts, their projections, and their insecurities disguised as advice. Instead of defending your dreams, you spend that time building them. In private, you become fully responsible for your progress. When there is no audience to blame, no onlookers to impress, you are forced to confront the truth. Either you showed up today or you didn't. That kind of accountability is uncomfortable, but powerful. You develop the discipline to work even when you don't feel like it. You learn to rely on effort instead of motivation. And once you experience that level of self-leadership, no setback can break you easily. By the time the results start to show, the audience arrives naturally, but on your terms. They won't see the silent grind, the long nights, the self-doubt, the invisible failures, or the discipline that was built when no one was watching. They will only see the transformation, and even though they may think it appeared suddenly, you will know it was earned quietly, consistently, and without relying on a single drop of outside approval. Most people talk about progress because talking is easier than doing. It gives an instant sense of achievement without requiring the uncomfortable work that real growth demands. Every time someone announces their plans, they receive encouragement, likes, validation, or recognition that feels like movement. Even though nothing has changed, this traps people in a cycle where communication replaces commitment, and the illusion of being in motion becomes more satisfying than effort. Real progress requires silence because silence gives no reward until work has been done. When progress is only spoken about, the brain feels accomplished before action even begins. That emotional reward makes starting harder and consistency almost impossible. People get used to the dopamine of sharing intentions instead of the discipline of executing them. So they repeat the pattern: new goal, new announcement, new praise, no progress. 6 months go by, then a year, then 5, and nothing meaningful has changed. Talking lets people feel productive while avoiding the risk of failure. Those who make actual progress accept the risk and step forward anyway. Progress demands discomfort. It demands long periods with no applause, no recognition, and no visible reward. That pressure pushes many people back into talking because talking is simpler, safer, and feels better in the moment. They don't have to face the truth of whether their effort is matching their ambition. The few who actually make progress understand that silence is the price. They are willing to suffer boredom, repetition, frustration, and failure while everyone else is busy announcing how motivated they are. Those who talk more than they execute rarely build the habits that create success. They build an image instead of a foundation. The people who build in silence create routine, discipline, structure, and momentum. They stack microscopic wins every day, things no one sees, until they reach a level that looks like a sudden leap from the outside. The leap was not sudden. It was earned quietly, consistently, while others were busy promoting a version of themselves that didn't exist yet. Talking also invites unnecessary judgment and opinion, which slows progress even more. Once people announce their goals, they start worrying about how others will react to their progress. They play to the audience instead of the mission. Fear of falling short becomes stronger than the desire to move forward. The few who make real progress remove the audience altogether. When there is no one to impress, the only metric that matters is the work done that day. Those who act instead of talk hold themselves to a different standard. They don't measure themselves by intention, but by output. They look at results honestly, see where they are weak, and adjust without needing anyone else to approve. Their days are filled with execution rather than explanation. While others debate what they should do, the executors have already done it. They get further simply because they move sooner and move more often. Execution compounds. One good day leads to another. One small improvement unlocks the next. Even imperfect action still builds momentum, while perfect plans without action build nothing. After months of consistent effort, executors have skills, progress, and results that talkers could have had but didn't earn. The difference is not intelligence, talent, or opportunity. It is simply consistent forward motion while others were occupied with conversation. Eventually, the gap between the talkers and the doers becomes impossible to ignore. The ones who executed quietly arrive with visible transformation, skill, confidence, growth, opportunity, while the talkers are still discussing plans. And in that moment, everyone learns the same truth. The world does not reward intention, it rewards proof. Most people never understand how powerful disappearing can be because they have never given themselves enough time away from distractions to see what consistent effort can really create. When you step away from constant noise, opinions, and interruptions, you're finally able to see your life clearly. What's working, what's wasting time, and what needs to change. In silence, you are alone with the truth, and that truth forces growth. 6 months may not seem long, but when every day is spent improving instead of proving, the difference becomes undeniable. Disappearing demands discipline because you remove all the excuses that come from the outside world. When no one is watching, you can't blame anyone for your lack of effort. There's no audience to perform for, nowhere to hide, and no one to impress. It's just you, your actions, and whether you executed or didn't. That pressure forces you to grow up mentally. Instead of seeking motivation, you begin building responsibility. And when you develop that level of accountability, progress stops being optional and starts being inevitable. Most people crave results without realizing the price required. They want the glory, the recognition, and the transformation, but they don't want the silence that real improvement demands. The silence is uncomfortable because it means working without applause, doing things that no one will see, and showing up when no reward is guaranteed. But it is in that space where no one claps and no one notices that strong habits are formed. Growth begins where comfort ends. Consistency becomes unavoidable when you remove the ability to escape. Disappearing takes you away from the distractions that usually pull you off track: social media, validation seeking, drama, comparison, and unnecessary conversations. Without those influences, there is nothing left but the work. You wake up every day and attack the mission because there is no reason not to. Over time, you no longer ask, how do I stay motivated? Because consistency has turned into part of your identity. Improvement accelerates because you are able to focus deeply without interruption. Work becomes more efficient, thinking becomes clearer, and solutions appear faster because your mind is no longer cluttered with noise. The same tasks that once took hours can be completed in a fraction of the time. When you work alone, in silence, your brain fully locks onto the problem instead of splitting attention across multiple distractions. Deep work creates deep results. The person you become after disappearing is very different from the one who started. The mind becomes stronger. The emotional swings become smoother. You stop panicking at setbacks because you've endured them daily while no one was watching. You build resilience, patience, grit, and mental sharpness simply by showing up day after day with no applause. And when the world finally sees the results, they never understand the thousands of invisible moments that produced them. People around you will assume something changed suddenly, but you will know that change was built slowly, consistently through repetition and effort. They never saw the nights you worked while tired, the mornings you pushed through doubt, the skills you sharpened alone, and the standards you raised when no one was there to judge. They don't need to understand the process because the results will speak louder than the explanation ever could. Real improvement demands disappearing because the transformation process is not glamorous. It's routine, repetitive, and often boring. It's waking up early, working late, failing quietly, correcting mistakes, and trying again without telling anyone. It is the kind of work most people refuse to do because there is no audience to reward it. But the ones who do it come back changed, stronger, sharper, more capable, and forever separated from those who only dream of improvement instead of disappearing long enough to earn it. Come back so changed that people don't even recognize who you were before, because that kind of transformation only comes from seasons of isolation, discipline, and relentless execution. When you disappear to work on yourself, you remove the distractions, the opinions, the noise, and the expectations of everyone else. You give yourself the space to think, the space to grow, and the space to rebuild. Most people's to prove their entire lives trying to prove they're improving, but the real game is improving so much that proof becomes undeniable. You aren't chasing validation, you're chasing evolution. And evolution requires sacrifice, focus, and silence. When you shut the world out for 6 months, you discover what you're really capable of because there is no applause, no audience, and no scoreboard, just you and the work. That's where character is built. That's where the internal conversations shift from excuses to accountability. Instead of saying, I'll try, you start saying, I must. Instead of convincing yourself why it's hard, you start convincing yourself why it's necessary. In isolation, you see how much time you actually had, how much energy you were wasting, and how many opportunities were already sitting in front of you waiting for you to wake up. People will doubt you in the beginning because they don't see progress fast enough. They'll question your decisions, your priorities, and your choices. But doubt is fuel. Silence is fuel. Being counted out is fuel. When you stop explaining yourself and simply execute, something powerful happens. You stop building for approval and start building for results. And the irony is that the same people who didn't believe in you early will be the ones asking how you did it later. That shift only happens when you disappear long enough to make your growth unavoidable. This kind of transformation means working when no one is watching, learning when everyone else is entertained, and choosing discipline when comfort is easier. It means waking up earlier, reading more, praying harder, training consistently, and attacking weaknesses one by one. It means sacrificing weekends, downtime, and instant gratification. It means choosing the long-term win over the short-term thrill. When you stack enough days like that together, you create momentum. And once momentum takes over, everything changes faster than anyone expected. During this time, you'll also learn that not everyone can come with you. Some people want the old version of you because that version required less of them. They were comfortable with your old standards, old habits, and old limits. But you didn't disappear to make others comfortable, you disappeared to get better. Growth demands that you let go of old environments, old conversations, and old expectations. Not everyone is meant to understand the season you're in, and that's perfectly fine. This is your journey, not theirs. By the time you return, your actions will speak louder than any explanation ever could. You won't need to announce your improvement, your presence will announce it for you. People will notice the way you talk, the way you move, the way you think, and the way you execute. They will look at you and realize you didn't just change your life, you changed your standards, you came back sharper, hungrier, calmer, and more focused. That's the kind of shift that can only come from isolation fueled by purpose. You become the version of yourself that can no longer tolerate the behaviors, habits, and excuses that used to hold you back. You develop a seriousness about your life that others can feel without you saying a word. You move different, you operate different. You see opportunities where you once saw obstacles. You start solving problems instead of describing them. You become the kind of person others seek out for guidance because you've proven you can transform, not theoretically, but physically, financially, mentally, or spiritually. And when people ask what you did, they won't understand that it wasn't one big breakthrough. It was hundreds of small decisions repeated relentlessly in silence. It was showing up on the days you didn't feel like it. It was choosing growth when no one was clapping. It was refusing to let your old self survive the process. You didn't disappear to hide. You disappeared to build. You didn't evolve to impress. You evolved because you finally demanded more from yourself than anyone else ever could. You've spent your whole life waiting for the right moment, the perfect circumstances, the clean runway to take off. But there is no perfect moment. There is only now. And 6 months from today, you will look back at this exact point and either be grateful you started or regret that you didn't. The world doesn't need another person talking about what they're going to do. The world needs someone who actually does it. Someone who shows up when they're tired, when they're unsure, when no one is cheering, and when nothing is guaranteed. Someone willing to bet on themselves even when no one else does. So walk away from this moment with a decision to lock in, a decision to stop waiting and start building, a decision to disappear into the work and come back unrecognizable. Your future self is watching you right now, hoping you finally commit, hoping you finally push past the excuses, hoping you finally go all in. This is the season that separates the ones who talk from the ones who take control. If you want to shock everyone, you have to start by shocking yourself. The next 6 months could change your entire life, but only if you do the work. Now go start, lock in, and don't come back the same.